Welcome to Abnormal, the podcast for normal people who want to do abnormal things. Today, I'm joined by co-founder and CEO of Unplugged, Hector Hughes. Unplugged is a company in the UK that provides unique getaways in the form of a digital detox, where guests hand their phones in at the start of a 3-day stay in some of the most beautiful, remote cabins you could ever find. Hector, welcome to Abnormal.
Thank you very much, Pete. Very much looking forward to this.
How was that as a summary of what you guys actually do? Have I hit the nail on the head or am I way off the mark?
No, that's it. That's it. It's pretty simple. It's really like we are really focused on can we actually get people off their phones, because I think there's a lot of marketing around digital detoxing, get people offline, but it's widely spoken about, poorly practiced. So the question is like, can we actually get people to do that and spend 3 days offline in nature? And if you do that, then it's really a very profound experience, because it takes about a day for the mind to settle down. So for the first day, you're actually a bit more anxious. You almost feel like you've lost a limb. And then you start to get this deep sense of calm. And what that is the mind de-stimulating. And what's crazy is like, that's how we're built to operate. We're built to, be this kind of calm being, rather than walking around with the low level anxiety that everyone suffers from today. So it's very revealing that just a few days offline really can transform us.
Yeah, I want to obviously dive deep into all of that sort of stuff and go more into Unplugged throughout the conversation. But I just want to kick things off. Hector, what's one thing that listeners should know about you as a person to give them the best context for the rest of this conversation?
That's a good question. I really fucked up's a strong phrase. I really fucked up my life for the first 25 years. I had a decade from 15 to 25, just really getting it wrong, drinking, doing a lot of drugs, all these kind of things. Went through a fairly drastic rebrand in 2019, went to a silent retreat in the Himalayas, quit my job a week later to do this, went stone cold sober. And then I'm just in the process of going through another rebrand, which is towards a slightly more balanced life. So I started drinking again a little bit, and just generally living with a bit more balance. So that's a whistle-stop tour of the last 15 years.
That's a very important piece of context, I think. And one that I think probably a few people would relate to somewhat, like having spent those first 25 years a bit lost, going down that path. And I think after the whole uni thing in the UK, and a lot of people find themselves going down something similar. But you mentioned the Himalayas there. I've obviously done some digging into your story and listened to interviews and read articles and things myself. But can you talk us through everything up to Unplugged? Like you mentioned the drinking, the drugs, and then now you're into this business where it's all focused on wellness, all focused on digital detox. What was the kind of build up to that phase where you had that aha moment and you're like, right, fuck this, I need a change?
Yeah, for sure. So I guess it goes right back to childhood. I think looking back on that period, one of the defining features was I was a pretty dyslexic kid. So I was always good with numbers, bad with words at school. So very slow reading and writing. And most subjects at school require reading and writing. So I was not academic. And I think I just had, but I also the number logic side of things came very easily to me. So I think I had a little bit of this, like, I'm not going to try all of this stuff that I'm obviously not good at and look stupid. So I'm just not going to try it. And that almost became my kind of way of dealing with school. And so for, that just really compounded. I think I always had a sense that, like, a naive optimism that everything would just always work itself out eventually. So I was never worried, but I really did not apply myself at all at school. Got in a lot of trouble, I think, when I was, but then also I had, in some sense, I was very sure of myself. Like there were clearly areas that I had strengths, but then in other sense, I think I was deeply insecure in myself as well. So, a lot of social anxiety at various points. I think it is just tough, being a child or a teenager in school, boarding school as well, which I think complicates that dynamic somewhat. And that led to around the age of 14, 15, finding drinking and just finding that as a way, frankly, of just like fitting in. And, people find it funny if you get really drunk. And that almost became a bit of a calling card. So I then just really threw myself into that. And I've done some quite a lot of therapy on these various dynamics in my life, because I have this very extreme side to my personality, like all or nothing. So I will kind of go all in on, I think a lot of entrepreneurs are like that, right? Like you're very all in on startups generally, but you went completely sober from being very extreme in the other direction. And so I've just have this like very drastic swings. And I think a lot of that, after some therapy around it, is due to, I just had this almost idea when I was, I don't know, 9, 10, 11, and I was kind of got upset by something and cried or something like that. And then that wasn't, necessarily well received, or I was embarrassed. So then I just developed this mechanism of like, it's not good or it's a weakness to show emotion. So I just need to lock this all away and just put out this impression that I'm fine. So whatever happens, that nothing could touch me and I'm fine. So I just built this mechanism, which on one hand is great for resilience and enduring and getting through stuff, but then it also means that you just really repress your emotions. I'm a very unemotional person trying to be a bit more emotional. And I think what that does is when you get these releases like drinking or drug taking or whatever it is, and for the first, like all of that suppression just comes out, and I just would fucking dial it up to max. So I just had this very, very extreme side of me, which would really take it way too far on all of those things. And again, I just really didn't kind of apply to myself. It didn't take life seriously. It was like, I can just lean into this and it's funny and it's a good way of making friends and whatever it is. So that really defined me for a very long time. And then out of university, I did a maths degree, and which I was not studious for, but managed to scrape a reasonable degree in the end. And I half-assed some job applications, didn't get any of them. So a friend of mine was like, "Why don't you just go work for a startup for a year, and then you can reapply in a year's time?" So I applied to 20 startups. One of them offered me a job, which was a iPad point of sale startup. So if you go into a restaurant or a cafe and they use an iPad for the till, and I started that. I was the second employee. My now co-founder was the first employee. And that was just a lot of fun. It was the first time I'd been like really engaged with a challenge, intellectually stimulated. I was doing sales for the first year, which I wasn't particularly good at, but it was fun just being in the startup environment. And then I did a year running product and then a year running growth. And through that time, the company grew to about 70 people. We launched in the US, launched in Australia. So it was a lot of fun. It was a mess behind the scenes, as these things often are. But yeah, it was the first time I like really got stuck into something. And then it just became a bigger and bigger conflict. I would still just have these big nights out, I'd see a certain social event on my calendar and it would just fill me with anxiety, because I know that's going to be a write-off for the few days afterwards. So it was just living this like very unsustainable life. And I think alongside that, I was also just busying myself in whatever it was. I think I had this dissatisfaction. So it was like, I just got to work harder, be busier to try and solve my way through it, which never works. And so I really just started to feel very kind of burnt out with it. One of the big elements of that was my phone. And, because obviously that's your gateway to everything, to work, to friends, like whatever it might be. And so I just really started to not love my phone, I would say. Started to read more about it. I read a book called Digital Minimalism in the first half of 2019, which is, does what it says in the tin. It's about using technology less, basically. And really was enamored by that. And they'd speak a lot about unplugged and unplugging and that. So I just thought then, before I was thinking about cabins, unplugged would be a great name for a business. So I tried to buy unplugged.com, which cost over 100 grand. So I didn't buy it, but shelved that one. And then was just getting more into like meditation and all of these kind of things. And then a friend of mine recommended the silent retreat in the Himalayas. And I initially like laughed it off. Again, I think I still had this, wasn't comfortable with myself. And I thought, what do the guys at work think? Like, I'm not the kind of guy who can go to a Buddhist retreat. And eventually I was like, what have I got to lose? So got out there. And it was an incredible experience, very profound. The best thing about it was when you get there, they take your phone off you. You just spend 10 days completely cut off from the outside world. So came back from that, literally quit my job a week later and got started on Unplugged.
Holy shit, man. What a story. And thank you for the honesty. Like, it goes a very, very long way in telling your story and giving the context. Like, so rarely, especially from men, do you hear people talk about going to therapy and having anxiety and all that kind of shit. And and it's so powerful. Like only recently myself have I started to go see a therapist, and it's something that I never thought I would do, but it's helped. And it, you know, fuck it, who knew, right? Who knew that talking to a professional could actually help you? It's the same as I've been an athlete my whole life, and going to the gym and going to physios helps. Well, no shit, going to see a therapist helps, right? Um, I want to go, like, not going back to the very start, but that is a lot to take in. And you mentioned
Mm.
the therapy, you mentioned the anxiety of the social events, the big nights out, the big like week benders or whatever it was. Has that anxiety subsided now that you're doing this?
Yeah, 100%. Because I think the 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 catalyst to that was I realized that, like, it never occurred to me back then that not drinking was an option. It was just like, it's so, growing up in the UK, it's so part of your identity. All of my
Yeah.
friendships, fundamentally revolved around going out together or meeting at the pub or whatever it might be. And so it just did not occur to me that that was an option. And then but I was really kind of reaching the end of my tether with it. And I saw this YouTube clip, which was a woman called Nikki Glasser on Joe Rogan's podcast. And it said Nikki Glasser read this book 7 years ago and hasn't drunk since. And it's her talking about this book called Stop Drinking Now by a guy called Alan Carr, who's famous for The Easy Way to Stop Smoking. And I read the book and just stopped completely like that. So that was incredibly empowering. And I went completely sober for 4 years. It coincided with COVID. It coincided with starting the business. And I think the starting Unplugged really helped because it's something to channel yourself into. Like I said, I think every entrepreneur has that, really needing it to dial it up tendency. And so actually having the stresses and strains, and I think the intellectual stimulation of a startup was a really good outlet for me. So I didn't miss it at all. And honestly, I just felt so grateful to be past that part of my life because it was such a mess. So I now feel no, like, I think because back then you're talking about that anxiety, like it's this anxiety of like, I really don't want to do this, but I know that I'm going to do this and it's going to end up like this, and just feeling so helpless. And I think what's changed is now that I've spent that period not drinking, I feel completely comfortable not doing that, right? And I think there's so much social pressure around these things. A lot of it all comes from us, right? It comes from us, the individual. And I think I was so not sure in myself back then. I had so much of my self-worth in this kind of persona that, would go for it and get fucked up and do all these things, that I didn't feel that I could, like, get away from that life. So yeah, getting away from it has completely changed everything. And like I said, I've started drinking a little bit now. Absolutely nothing like back in those days, and that's very empowering as well, just to see a healthier relationship with it.
And how's that been, like, sort of reintroducing alcohol to, not to your day to day, but it must feel, if I'd gone teetotal for 4 years and then I kind of go back into it, considering what you say your previous life was, yeah, how's that relationship been, and how has that whole journey of reintroducing alcohol and having those social occasions with alcohol instead of just teetotal?
Yeah, it's been fine. I would say I uh I still have a little bit of a mixed relationship with it. Like, as in, I'll have sometimes I have a couple of drinks that'll be a lot of fun, and that was great. But other times I would just be like, why did I have 3 drinks yesterday? Like, it didn't really add anything. Because I think I've also experienced having a lot of fun not drinking, and I think before all of this, I was not capable of having fun in a social setting without drinking, because I was so reliant on it. It was such a crutch that you have this kind of almost discomfort, like self-consciousness, but before you have a drink, and it's having the first beer or the second beer, whatever it is, starts to soothe that. And I was so reliant on alcohol back in the day that would just dominate any social event. But I think being off it for so long really led me to just find out how to enjoy socializing. Obviously, that sounds like such a stupid thing to say, without drinking, which is crazy. And so now that I've got that, like, sometimes it does actually, obviously it's fun drinking, but like sometimes it does actually hamper an event rather than add to it.
Yeah, for
So
sure,
yeah,
for sure.
I haven't kind of massively dialed out, which is nice. So it feels healthy.
I think it's I'm not similar to you in that respect in terms of going teetotal for 4 years. But considering I was also at university in the UK, I was part of that whole rugby culture growing up, and it's very much renowned for being a bit loose and always drinking and the drinking culture. My drinks now, I'm with you in the sense that why the fuck did I have those 3 drinks yesterday at a networking event? I have those thoughts regularly because for me, I'm so precious about who I spend my time with. And I'm even more precious about who I spend my alcohol beverages with. So if I'm with my best mates or with some really good friends and we're having a dinner party, I'll be more than happy to sort of share a couple of bottles of wine or have a couple beers because I know that these are my nearest and dearest, and I'm gonna have a good time. It's gonna be like the social lubricant. We're gonna have a good night. But I hate going to like work events or networking events and having drinks to sort of, as you say, ease the social anxiety to make it easier to network and grab the business cards and do all that shit which people do. And I really, really found myself disliking that element to work when I was working sort of in an office or in a job. And when you're in like a BD role in sales, as I'm sure you know, that's often quite a big part of it is going to these like dinners and wine and dine events and trying to schmooze. And yeah, it's one of the things that I absolutely hated. And now I've got a very good relationship with alcohol. I love drinking, but it's very selected. It's very few and far between. I know exactly when I'm doing it. I know who I'm doing it with, and I think your journey through that. I think so many people will be the same as you in the first part of your life, but will never have that realization and will never then have that strong relationship with alcohol and empowering relationship with it because they'll just continue on that path, right? Because that's what they know. And it's very hard to hear stories like that and uncomfortable to hear because you know that the majority won't have had the willpower like you did or read the book and had that moment where okay, I'm going sober. I'm going sober now. I need to get control of my life. And then now you've done some pretty cool stuff. Do you ever think about what your life would be like now if you didn't have those moments or those few key sort of kinks in the road where you made seemingly what looks like the right decision in terms of your life trajectory?
Yeah, for sure. It's a really interesting question. I think on one side, definitely. On the other side, like for whatever reason, I've just, as I said earlier, like always had this innate belief that everything would just work itself out. Like I'm very much a kind of extreme optimist, which has its
I'm sure
strengths
that
and
pisses a
weaknesses.
load of people off as well.
I'm sure, I'm sure it does. It can get you into trouble as well, but it also has its benefits. But yeah, I mean, I reflected on it, and like I think what was almost fortunate about my situation is like how badly I got it wrong. Like it was, I did a lot of really fucking stupid stuff, and just woke up like just disgusted with myself. Like what the fuck are you doing with your life? And I think there's something about if you really go too far in one direction and really get it wrong, then that can be the wake up call you need. And there's almost a trap where you're kind of, you're doing that a little bit, but it's never so terrible that it's
It's
a
not
wake
bad
up call.
enough. It's not
Yeah,
bad enough.
exactly.
Yeah, it's like that paradox, right? And you need things to be really bad to make a change. Otherwise, you'll just
100%.
accept it.
100%. So I think all the kind of drive and whatever that I've channeled into Unplugged has been as a result of just getting it so wrong in the kind of first chapter of my life. So I think, it's always hard to kind of try and hypothesize later on about, how I got out of this or what it is, because there's so much luck involved. And there's so much like, again, change has to come from the individual. And, I'd love to tell you that, I was so smart because I figured it out, but it's just for whatever reason, my particular set of circumstances led to that realization. And, some people go into these situations and are fortunate and that happens, like me. Others go into the situation and, you can kind of get it too wrong the other way. So, know people or know people who know people who, for example, had one really bad trip on some random party drug and now have psychosis and never going to be the same again. So there's definitely a kind of fortunate side of it of like 10 years of really getting on it. I managed to come out relatively unscathed. I'm sure there's some psychological trauma that I need to work through, but not too bad from it. So the point there is like there is so much luck involved, and as you say, like yeah, I do. I'm very grateful that that change happened, and part of me is like, oh yeah, but it was always going to happen. But I think that's very much survivorship bias, and it doesn't always happen. So I'm grateful to be sitting here talking to you.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's a great message to a lot of people out there, I'm sure, who are going through some shit themselves, or just need to make that step to go see a therapist or read that book or go for that breath of fresh air. I mean, it's so I fucking love this story because what you're doing now is so the opposite of your first life. I'm gonna call it, right.
Yeah,
It's so cool, and I tell you what made me laugh. Right, is when I first sent the email to you and to ask you to come on the podcast, and then we were trying to discuss the times, and then it was so in character for the business because it was, oh, I'm actually out of office from Thursday till Monday. I'm completely off my emails. Can we email me next week, sort of thing, with some times? And I was like, is that just his like go-to response to show that he's really like buying into the business and everything, or is he really unplugging this weekend? So which one is it? Is that just your like auto send on
that's
email?
the out of office. No, I'm joking. It's yeah, I do definitely practice what I preach, and it's one of those where it's quite a nice self-fulfilling prophecy where I'm talking about this all day with the team, with publicly, whatever it is, and it helps reinforce that in my mind. What I've found as well is like doing this, like actually spending time offline, makes me personally crave more time offline. So there's a nice like momentum in the other direction, because all the momentum in society at the moment is towards spending more and more time online. But actually, it's almost a shift in perspective is what we're trying to do. So once you spend a few days offline, and you realize that one, you can do that, the world doesn't end, and also there's just this like, when you strip away the fucking noise, just how much calm you can access, then that is addictive, and so very much crave that now. So I try to get offline as much as I can. There's obviously a massive conflict with running a startup, and there have been some incredibly intense periods, and there's a sense of when you're the founder, like it's all on you, and you've just got to, like, no one's coming to save you. You just got to fucking get your head down and solve it. But I will very much get offline whenever I can. So yeah, when we were chatting over email, just went and spent 3 or 4 days offline in the Peak District with a good friend of mine, and like that kind of thing, I just find so restorative. And whenever I do it as well, so I wish I did it more. I probably stay in our cabins 3 times a year as well. I'm always just like, the biggest unlock is like, why didn't I do this more? Because you have
Mm.
this sense, especially when stuff's busy, and especially when the pressure's on and you're feeling stressed, whatever it is, we have this, there's almost this kind of, I feel like when I'm feeling insecure about something in the business, like I haven't solved this problem, then my gut reaction is to like work harder and be busier and take more meetings and do all these things. When often the best approach is the opposite, is that actually take a fucking step back. And when you do that, you realize that most of what I'm doing at the moment is bullshit anyway, and none of that moves the needle. And actually I just need to do this like 1 or 2 things. And that's it. So I think you do need to be super focused and like give it everything to make a startup work. But quite often, I think we're just so inefficient with how we go about that, and there's a huge amount of benefit for taking the time off, and by off, offline just makes such a fucking difference, because like for example, my WhatsApp, whatever, like the work life balance is completely blended. Most of my friends are founders at the moment who I talk to regularly, and so I could go and be offline, or sorry, be not working, but if I'm on my phone, then everything's still work
Yeah.
related. So I think there's something incredibly powerful about getting completely away from it, completely offline, and it's only when we do that we realize just how overstimulated we are.
I love that. I fucking love that. And it must be so difficult and conflicting as a founder to like, you're in one of the most stressful jobs that you could be in, self-inflicted, and you're seeing the success of it as well. You're getting the fruits of your labor. But it's funny because I've only been in environments where I've been in startups where the founders and or the seniors or whether the shareholders are so intense, so invested in the company with their time. And I'm a big believer from in my athlete background that you need to rest as hard as you perform, right? And I'm purely taking that from, like, I'm not a successful entrepreneur. I'm trying to be, but I'm not a successful entrepreneur. You know, this is why I love talking to guys like you and people that I've had on the podcast, because I'm trying to just ask as many questions as I possibly can to get as many lessons as I possibly can, and hoping that listeners get value from it as well. But in sports, you train fucking hard, you work hard, but then they tell you to go home and nap and get a massage and really just chill the fuck out for the next 2 days, and then come back and do it all again and train really hard, because that's when you get your most gains. That's when you get the most performance gains. And what I'm seeing in some of the startups that I've worked in is, when you're always on, you're never on. And that's a lesson that I've taken from being in those environments, because especially the culture, the work culture where I am in Hong Kong, it's so intense. The work hours, like they're always on laptops, they're always on their phones working. But actually, to your point, I don't think much is getting done there. I think it's purely to be online. And I've had these discussions with some of the companies I've been involved with previously, which haven't gone down too well on my behalf, to be like, guys, I think some of the big decisions that you need to make, that we need to make, are probably best done outside of the office, or chilling out a bit. Let's go for a walk and do this, or let's just not work for a weekend and then come back on Monday and see if we still feel the same way. So how much of it in your line of work have you had any serious examples where shit's really hit the fan, but you're trying to unplug, but you're like, you're just in the trenches, shit's got to move forward, you're the founder at the end of the day?
Yeah, 100%. Like there have been times when, 2 or 3 years ago, like went through a lot of, just went through a long period of having less than 6 weeks cash in the bank, and had like holidays I cancelled because like I wouldn't have made it we wouldn't have made it to the end of the week with the money still in the bank. And so, then you've just got to you've got to stay and you just got to get the money. So there's been a lot of stuff that's been cancelled along the way. But it's the sense of like, it's always been when, I'd been behind or like not quite getting it right. And then it's been these moments where I've kind of been very swept up in the like busyness of it all. And as I was saying earlier, like when you're feeling insecure because you haven't solved the thing, that you haven't raised enough money, like whatever it might be, then I find that's when I like get the busiest. And so I think there's a few different things there. One, I completely agree with you. I think entrepreneurs generally can learn a lot from athletes. I think that the nuance there, the difference is that like, if you are playing a professional sport, you've got to turn up well to training, but fundamentally what really fucking matters is how you turn up for that one or two matches a week. And so there's this like very kind of short burst. I think with being a founder, like you've got to be pushing stuff forward every day. Like you have to be there. You have to be there for the team. But I think to your point is like so many founders just are in such a bad state each day. They're so stressed, the team gets that. It kind of seeps into everything else. And fundamentally, I feel like every startup leaps forward in these like moments of insight. So it's almost like how you're seeing the business and how you're seeing the industry, the problem you're trying to solve is changing all the time. And you just have these like moments of unlock when you realize that this is a completely different business than I thought the one we were in. And that might make the last 6 months of work completely redundant. And you realize that like, actually, this is the path we need to take forward. So I think it's also like, how do you open yourself up for these moments of insight and just really like understanding what the game you're playing is? Because I agree with you. I think most work that happens in most startups is bullshit. Like you could probably take away 90% of the work and nothing would change. Like when I was working for this previous startup, we had 70 people and we over time, got rid of a 10-person marketing team. Nothing changed. The leads and sales stayed the same. And then we got rid of a 30-person sales team, probably down to about one person, and basically nothing changed. So
That's
it's crazy. It's absolutely wild how much you think all this work you're doing is kind of driving it forward, when really it's making no difference at all. So I think through that lens, it's like all this busy work that's stressing us out is really counterproductive, frankly. And I also think to take the athlete analogy of like you have this big event, so often you've got you might have one call or two or three calls or meetings in the week that really fucking matter more than anything else, and yet we'll spend our time getting stressed out and caught up in everything else, and then we'll turn up a ball of nerves to those meetings. So
Yeah.
I think there's a lot to be said. Like if you've got a really fucking important meeting one day, and that is like the most important thing for you to sort in the next 3 months, then why not just spend the morning really getting fucking prepared for that and go and turn up well
Spend
to
the
that.
week. Spend the
So yeah,
fucking week
exactly,
preparing for
exactly.
it.
Yeah, yeah. Don't
If
work
that's your
till
cup final,
that's the cut. Is that, yeah? It's the cut final, isn't it? So don't work until midnight the night before, and then turn up as a kind of fucking nervous wreck for the actual meeting. And I think that is where a lot of entrepreneurs get it wrong, myself included sometimes, of like not prioritizing yourself. Like I've been through periods where I put myself, I very big into the whole kind of, really walking, like all the things you should do. But I think there's an element of self-care that has been lacking as well, where in times I put myself in, bad financial situations or overloaded myself with stuff to do, whatever it is. And it's just mean that I haven't turned up as well as I could have for the team and for the company. So it's in the end been counterproductive.
you mentioned these like moments of insight, I think you called them, or moments of like enlightenment. And I think the beauty of what you guys are building is you're kind of allowing people the weapons to give them more opportunities for these moments of insight in their lives. So your Himalayas trip, your trip there was a really intense 10-day retreat, but that gave you one of the biggest insights or moments of enlightenment in your life so far because it's completely changed the whole course of it. And I think from what I've researched and what I'm listening from what you're saying is by providing people the cabin and 3-day digital detox or just a digital detox in general, you're going to be more equipped as an individual to have these moments of insights, deep insights in yourself and what's important in your life. Whereas if you don't do that, you're just going to continue down the path you're on or a similar path, which doesn't move the needle in your life in any way. Whereas you need to have these moments where you step back and you equip yourself with no phone, nature, fire, whatever it is, whatever you guys do with the cameras and, just talking to people and being there in nature, you're giving yourself more opportunity to step back and think about the things that actually matter. Am I right in saying that, in your opinion?
Yeah, 100%. I think to kind of put it simply, going and spending 3 days offline in the cabin isn't going to solve all your problems, but it's going to give you the space to get a better idea of what those problems are and come up with a plan to solve them. Because I think we're so bombarded in our day to day that it's so hard to see. Like, we all kind of know what we should be doing more of, or like deep down subconsciously we know what the issues are, but you actually just need the space to really let the mind settle down and to realize what these things are. And I think we have this idea that we don't have time to go and do this. Like, I don't have time to go and spend 3 days offline, but it's much more a case of like, do you have time to not do this? It's like, if you're so busy right now, then do you really have time just to keep plowing on with the same strategy that's not working? So I think, yeah, you're absolutely right, which is give people the space. It's like, I think we have such a culture of like adding, I need to like add this new tool or buy this new thing or do this new thing that's going to solve my problems. And quite often the answer is to subtract and to take away. It's like, if you can just take away the phone and take away all the shit that comes with that, then the human mind is a wonderful thing. And it's amazing what surfaces. So we really just don't allow our minds to wander. Like the human mind is still the most incredible, technology, if you want to call it that we have at our disposal. And yet we just drown it out all day long. And actually, if you just let it sit and let it wander and kind of let it do what it's been doing for thousands and thousands of years, then it's really remarkable what comes out, which is why, if you go for a walk without your phone, if you are in the shower, that's when ideas pop up because the mind for once can wander.
For sure. It's always the shower. It's always the walks. It's always yeah, literally, it's literally
Yeah,
when you're unplugged, right? Like that's when the
for
actual
sure.
big stuff happens. It's not when you're staring at the laptop. I need to work. For me, it's the same, right? I'm now on this journey of being a content creator and all this kind of stuff, right? My best fucking ideas happen when I'm like running or when I'm walking or when I've not got my phone on me. Sometimes when I'm sleeping, but it sure as shit ain't happening when I'm staring at my laptop or staring at a camera. Like that's not when I'm being creative. And I think it's the same with any other industry. It's not as much as you want to solve problems by working hard and that's what you think the logical outcome is. often that's the times that you do need to step away. Okay, so I want to talk about the actual 3 day retreat that you guys do. Can you talk us through like the typical journey or the typical process that people go through when they're coming for their sort of first retreat? You mentioned at the start of the episode that people kind of panic for the first day, and then the goodness happens. Can you let us know sort of what the typical journey is of that 3 days of that you've seen over the years?
Yeah, for sure, for sure. So we found that it's almost a behavioral psychology problem. So when we first launched, we were actually checking people in ourselves, and people would see a cabin on Instagram, they'd come to stay. We tried to take their phone off them, and they were like, "No way, what are you doing?" So we realized that it's won a lot before they even get there. So you know, you have to get people excited that that's what they're coming to do, and really like bought into that, because you know you need people to tell their family, tell their friends, like, I'm going here, I'm going offline for a few days. Once you've done that, so once we kind of get people there and they're excited to come and do that and prepared, everyone knows they're going to be away, then it's self-police. So you lock the phone away yourself. You've got a padlock you can close, and then a key in a sealed envelope. So it's enough friction that you're not opening on night one, but it's there if you need it. And then, yeah, there's a sense of, I think it's different for everyone. So you might have a sense of just relief when you lock your phone away, might be dread, you know, depending on who you are. What's interesting is whenever we tell people what we're doing, it really evokes a strong emotional reaction in one of two directions. Either they're like, that sounds incredible, get me there right now, or I could never do that. Like that sounds terrifying. So people are very divided on this, but once we've got people there locking their phone away, then probably the first 24 hours, you do actually feel a bit more anxious, because again, we're so dependent on our phones that you feel a bit like you've lost a limb. So you might get phantom buzzing in your pocket, whatever it is. So you wake up on that first full day, again, just might feel some discomfort, which is good. I mean, we're so not used to feeling discomfort that I actually think that's part of the process. And then you wake up on the second day, and there's just this like deep sense of calm, and you can just feel the mind calming down. And so we fix all our stays at 3 nights. You can't stay for less than that, because we want people to get into that state, and then they'll be able to spend at least a day or two in that state. And then, yeah, obviously on that kind of fourth day, when you get your phone back, everyone's different, but I think there's a lot of people like don't even want to touch their phone until they get back to London, or wherever they go back to. So I think there's a really interesting change of perspective that happens in terms of how people will then view the relationship with it. And I think the biggest thing is like people just realize that they can actually be offline. So I think we all have this narrative that like, I'm so important, the world is not going to cope with me being offline for 3 days. And then you do it, and nothing fucking changes, and it's always underwhelming when you check your messages, and
Shock.
no one's really got in touch.
Nothing fucking changes. You're not that important.
Nothing changes. Yeah.
Oh man, I mean, just listening to that, I wish you guys were out here in Hong Kong. Like it's just I know that I could do it myself. I know that I could put my phone away, but it's just so different, right? It's well, actually, I say I know I could do it myself. I know that I couldn't do it myself, because I know I check my phone. And so there's a beauty in paying someone to lock your phone away for you in a beautiful location with all the amenities and everything you need, right? Because if I'm doing it myself, then it's kind of well, it's not the same thing. I don't know. It's just not the same. Otherwise, people would be doing it, and you guys wouldn't be a successful business. Like it's obviously not the same thing. But it's such a strong need for what you're doing. And I mean, I'm feeling this especially over the last 6 months, because I'm now social media is part of my income now. You know, posting content is part of my income, and it's part of my life. And so I'm finding myself scrolling on Instagram, telling myself that it's like market research, and I'm checking out the trends and all that kind of shit, right? And I was like, is it like, who am I kidding? And then you go into bed, you're wired, you've got 45 minutes less sleep because you're so wired. And I don't know, I'm not really an anxious person, and I never have been, but I do see how it can really fuck with your mind a bit the more you're on your phone. And even the simple shit, right? Like having your phone face up at a dinner table at a party, and like it buzzing on your watch and your phone. And you know, I've stopped doing that, right? I put my phone away. If I'm talking to someone, I'm talking to someone. And I've started charging my phone in the living room instead of the bedroom, because it was just like I was just becoming too obsessed with it, and it was ruining my sleep, and I fucking love my sleep. And it was just, if you can't even do that when you're talking to someone one-on-one, if you can't even put your phone away and be present, That's for me was a red flag when I started doing that, and that was like, right, fuck
How
me,
deep?
something needs to change here.
Ooh,
And so, long-winded point, expansion. When you guys coming out to Hong Kong or Asia,
I'd love to. I'd love to. We've definitely got a lot of work to do in the UK first. We actually launched Spain last year, so we've got some more cabins on the way there.
and
But
how's that
yeah, I
going?
mean,
How's that
this
been
is
different to the UK launch? You're in Barcelona, right?
yeah, it's an hour north of Barcelona. It's gone really well. I think there are definitely some cultural differences, but it's still like Barcelona is still the same kind of hectic city as London. Like obviously the Spanish way of life is slightly different, but yeah, it's really seems to have resonated out there as well. There's already a big culture in that part of the world of kind of going out, being in nature, etc. So I think I think people were warmed up to this. This obviously helps that it's absolutely beautiful around there, and you just have some amazing locations. So yeah, that's been a hugely interesting kind of next step for us, and we get a lot of people going over from the UK to stay in the Spanish cabins as well. So yeah, I think it just opens up the kind of realization that we can really do this absolutely everywhere. I think there's a huge one big learning is like the I think the biggest risk for any entrepreneur is the like losing focus and all the shiny opportunities, because I think the type of personality types that end up starting something like this in the first place are the ones who are excited by all the shiny opportunities. And I'm just having to coach myself every year on like just focus, 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 focus. And so we just have so much more we can do in the UK. And I think all these kind of extra things we do just takes the focus away from that. And I think that there's a real opportunity to become culturally significant. And it's like once you have that really, really deeply ingrained base somewhere, then you can go and do whatever you want. But with the previous startup, we went to the US, went to Australia, almost like a growth hack, and it just completely pulled the company apart in terms of focus. So yeah, I would love to get it as far flung as we can, but got a lot of work to do in the UK first.
Yeah, that makes complete sense. Build your brand in your company in your home turf, and then build it out. That's actually Budgie Smuggler, the brand, the sort of
Yes.
swimmer. I spoke to the founder on the podcast actually, and he's a fucking cool guy, man. And he was saying the exact same. He's like, look after your home turf, and then the rest kind of looks after
Yeah.
itself. Like they're obviously Australia is their home turf, and they do so much in Australia for like Australian people. They really give back a lot, but in particular in Sydney and Manly, that's like where their HQ was and is. And they're like, if you can't fill out Manly Beach in Smugglers, then how are you going to expect to fill out the south of France in Smugglers? If Manly Beach is an 80% Smugglers, then we ain't expanding. We're not going anywhere else, because that's kind of it's your home turf. And I guess that's
That
exactly what you're saying, right?
Yeah, there's like this critical mass thing that I think you underappreciate of like, you could kind of do something somewhere and some people talk about it, whatever it is. But there's this compounding effect of like the more kind of talked about you can be somewhere, the more people you can get doing this, the more you can become this almost like cultural phenomenon. I think that's really the opportunity. So for us, the goal is, how do we make being unplugged as synonymous with switching off as Ubering is for traveling around,
Yeah.
right? Like that's really it. How can we like really ingrained in the culture here? And I think that's how you build one, something enduring, but two, something that actually like moves society. And I think the future is much more malleable than we think. We feel like it was always going to figure out work this way or this way. But, throughout history, you get things being drastically altered by individuals or small groups of individuals. And so I think as a company, just by existing, like, as I said earlier, all of the momentum is towards spending more and more time online. And just by existing, we start that conversation in another direction. Like you and me talking today, like all the people listening to this, it gets people thinking. But, if we can also get to a stage where we have thousands of cabins, we have hundreds of thousands, or even millions of people coming and doing this every 6 to 12 months, then that really moves society in a different direction. So like that's what's really exciting.
You're going to be put in a dictionary soon if you keep growing like this.
That's the
Like
plan.
like
That's the
like
plan.
Ubering, unplugging.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that would be a cool sort of endpoint for you guys, or not endpoint, but a cool one to tick off. Like I love that they're synonymous, Ubering with taxiing. Like that's fucking cool. Unplugging, I could see it. It's gonna be classed. Um, in terms of wellness, right? So Unplugged is all about digital detoxing, which kind of falls under the wellness bracket. I know that you've spoken before on other podcasts and in articles and stuff about your own like meditation practices and kind of how deep you are into meditating and how
Oh, yeah.
that's helped you.
Totally seeing that.
What
Right.
sort of wellness practices day to
What?
day? You
Uh,
mentioned you go to your own cabin sort of 3 times a year on average. Is there any like daily habits that you have that help you
Abby.
with your not
Cause
necessarily digital
Abby's happy.
detoxing, but your whole wellness sort of category as a whole, personally?
Yeah, for sure. Well, I think the best habit's the one that you actually do every day. There's a lot to be said for that, and I think we like where that whole space goes wrong is we feel like there are all these things we should be doing. So, we kind of overload with it and then it feels like a burden, and that completely defeats the point out of it. So we end up burning ourselves out with all the fucking wellness things we should be doing. So I think for whatever reason, like meditation, I just kind of kept hearing that it was a really worthwhile thing to do. So I just had in my mind, this was probably 2018, like this is something I should really figure out, and was using the apps like Headspace Calm, and I would like do a month where it would stick and I'd do well, and then I'd kind of fall off for a month. And then I heard about something called transcendental meditation, which is a lot of like, a lot the Beatles popularized it, and a lot of the kind of celebrities, actors, all these kind of people do it, and it's 20 minutes twice a day. And I did that, and again, it just completely stuck. For whatever reason, it's much less hard work than, because most meditation, Buddhist meditation, mindfulness, is designed for monastic living, so life in a monastery. So it's quite hard work. Like even focusing on your breath, it feels like a bit of a chore. But transcendental meditation, you just repeat this meaningless mantra to yourself. So you're given a mantra in this whole ceremony, which is a secret, so I can't tell you my mantra, unfortunately. And because it's meaningless, it like lulls you into the state of relaxation. So it's just a very like pleasant process. And so that just really stuck. Like again, when I learned it, I was like, there's no way I'm going to be able to do 20 minutes twice a day. But days are long. Like we were awake for 16 hours a day or whatever it is. Like it's absolutely wild that you can't spend 40 minutes meditating, and it massively improves the productivity for the rest of the day. So that has been a really good just rock in my routine.
And how long have you done that for?
That was probably summer of 2019 actually. So what's that? Coming
Wow.
up to 6 years, 5.5 years. And I haven't always done the twice a day, like sometimes, but the morning one never miss. So wake up in the morning, that's the first thing I do. And then I feel like all of these things are just tools, right? So like at various times I've done something called morning pages, which is where you just write for like half an hour to 3 pages journaling. And again, it's amazing how that unlocks the mind. At the moment, I've had some kind of health stuff recently, and I found Wim Hof breathing super helpful. So just doing that for like 15 minutes in the morning, like it really, really charges you up. So I think it's just having all of these things as tools in your locker. Because again, I've gone too far down that rabbit hole as well, where I've had like a fucking 3-hour morning routine. So I'll get up and meditate and exercise and journal and all these things, and then you just end up, by the time you actually get to the day, you're like, I'm
I'm meant
kind
to
of
be running a
knackered now,
fucking
so.
business here. Like I don't have time.
Exactly. So to that point, I think I've kind of been like, the one thing I'm just going to do first thing in the morning is meditate, and then sometimes it's like, and actually, then it's just nice to just go and crack through the like one bit of work that I really need to do today, and that's just out of the way, and it's 8 o'clock or whatever it is, and that's done. So I think it's about balance, as with all of these things. But they all, it really works. Like eating healthy, exercise is a huge one. I think again, it's hard to do every day, but in a good routine at the moment, and that makes such a difference. I think when we get busy and burnt out, exercise is one of the things that the people generally sacrifice. Like I've done that at various points. I think that really doesn't help. And so actually just getting out for a run, going to the gym, like whatever it might be, it is such a great boost to everything else. I think that's where, yeah, I really prioritize these things because I recognize that they do make the whole of the rest of the day easier, and I just turn out so much better for the rest of the day. So they really do work. I think there's a lot of like, it's easy to get burnout or FOMO about just all the things we should be doing. But what I would say, to anyone listening who is trying to build these habits more, is just pick the ones you enjoy. Like recently started playing five-a-side football on a Monday, which is, I used to play a lot of football, didn't play for years, and like that's just a lot of fun. It's really good exercise, and it's just nice that that's just one thing that's in the diary every week, and just a good kind of baseline. So I think it's finding these things that don't feel like a chore. And the other huge one for me has been reading. Like again, I was a dyslexic kid, really didn't read, and then again about 2018 went through a lot of changes around that time. Just really got into reading, and now I've found that like I actually had this introverted side that just loves an evening in with a book. And that has hugely benefited my life in terms of what it does to your brain, because neuroplasticity is real. And like, scrolling on your phone completely destroys our concentration and all these things, and makes us more anxious. Reading a book like really helps develop your your focus, your equanimity, like all of these things. And then just what you learn from it. I think fiction and nonfiction do different things. So nonfiction really helps you, understand, build these like mental models of the world, like understand what really happened if you read history or whatever it is. And fiction really helps you understand the human condition, because you're seeing the world through all these different people's
Yeah.
eyes. And so I think it really helps build empathy and all these things. So reading is one I would say that has been a huge benefit.
Do you have any recommendations of the most sort of transformative books that you have had the biggest impact on your lives that you would recommend to the listeners?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting one, because there are certain books at certain times that just connect. And for whatever reason, very early on that reading journey, a couple of books that really hit were, one was *Sapiens*, which is a classic, but and not the easiest read, especially if you don't read that much. But it just, it's the kind of future, it's the history of humanity. Sorry, and what I loved about it, it was like, I think the George Orwell said that the best books tell you what you already know, and I just had this like feeling in me that like all was not right, and the whole point they make in *Sapiens* is like, we are fundamentally haven't changed biologically in the last 50,000 years, but we're living in this society that we're so unsuited to, so we went from like roaming around and eating a varied diet and exercising and playing and all these things, to sitting at a desk for 9 hours a day and, living in these big overwhelming cities. And so I think that was just a massive light bulb moment. And then another one I read shortly afterwards, which is a wonderful book. I love all of Michael Lewis's books. He's the guy who wrote that Big Short, Liar's Poker. I just think he's brilliant. And he wrote a book called The Undoing Project, which is about the friendship between two Israeli psychologists, Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky. First of all, just a beautiful book, an incredible story. That they were both Jewish growing up in the Second World War. And they went on to form this just amazing intellectual partnership, and basically kind of creating or discovering the whole field of cognitive bias. So up until that point in history, again, it was this similar thing of like something I felt but couldn't quite put words to. Up until that point in history, all of economics assumed that humans were rational and we were rational players. And these guys just came out with these absolutely brilliant experiments that just prove that that's all bullshit. And we have all of these biases, the biases that's completely governing everything. So yeah, those are two books from the early days that really stood out.
What's your thoughts on like podcasts, audiobooks versus actually hard books, sitting down, taking the time to read? Because I asked this question very selfishly from my standpoint, because I'm a massive podcast guy or an audiobook, but again, I'm going to use a fucking pathetic excuse. Sometimes I feel like I don't have time to sit on the sofa and read a book, which is obviously not true. It's just I'm not making the time, right? Here we go. It's me making another excuse. But I love listening to a podcast when I'm on a long run, when I'm walking to work, all that sort of stuff. What's your view on that? Like, is it? Do you prefer sitting down with sort of a paperback or a hardback? And what do you do? Do you do all three? What's your preference?
Yeah, well, I think they just do different jobs. So I'm a huge advocate in the benefits of podcasting. I think the fact that you can, be a fly on the wall on a conversation between two people, and you have access to the most incredible and smart and talented people in the world. So I think as a format, it's amazing, but it's a different benefit it gives you. So I think I go through periods of listening to a lot of podcasts and listening to less, and there'll be times when I've spent a lot of time listening to podcasts. I think you can hear one sentence, one line in the podcast, and that can just be a massive unlock for you. And you can be like, oh, that makes so much fucking sense. And that can really affect change. So I think there's a huge amount of benefit in that. And I think it's digestible. It's, easier to integrate with the lives we're living in a way that, reading a weighty book is not. I think there's something different. There's a good expression that you're the sum of the 5 people you spend the most time with, which I
fucking love that. Love that.
Is wonderful.
Absolutely love that.
I think the same applies to reading, where if you're reading a biography of someone, a big thick biography, and you're with that person for 20 hours, then that is just a lot more time that the nature of reading and just how kind of slowly it's consumed to some extent is it just, again, it just allows the mind to wander. It allows you to kind of start to form all of these connections in the background. So there's something, I mean, again, as an athlete, like there's a lot to be said for just getting the reps in. And, if you're reading for 3 hours a day, you do just get a lot of reps in, because, podcasting, again, you can listen to a lot of podcasts, but there is that element of, you can also be doing other stuff. You can be in the gym, whatever it is. And so you've
Yeah,
got,
for sure.
maybe like 50% of your mind listening to it. Like there's something magical about reading a book. So I'm a big fan of physical books as well. Of you are just like there with the book, and you really have to concentrate. So especially these heavier books, and so that has got you completely present, completely in this moment. Your mind's still going to wander, but you really got to kind of do the work through it. And I think that process is very good for the brain, and it does just give you much more time to integrate what you're hearing. So yeah, different things. I think podcasting completely changes how we learn and what's possible. And in that journey I was speaking about, when I made all these big life transitions, like podcasting was a huge part of that. So it was the Tim Ferriss a lot, things like that. I actually really got into reading, so I listened to a podcast with a guy called Naval Ravikant, and he said one line in there which was, read what you love until you love to read. And that just completely unblocked my reading, because I would always have this like book I felt like I needed to read, so it would feel like a chore. So you can just hear these little tidbits that can just change everything.
Yeah, for sure. And I think a lot of the podcasts, the big time podcasts now are pretty good at planting those seeds and those quotes in the
Yeah.
script of the podcast so that they get clipped and blasted on social media. And I mean, it's fair enough, right? That some of those clips are really good clips and really good quotes. And even some guys do it better than others. But when I was listening, I listened to your episode with Ali Abdal, and I thought it was a fucking great episode. And he's a great interviewer, creator. I'm a big fan of his, having followed his content and his YouTube stuff, because that's something that I'm trying to get into. And the thing that you're saying about spending more time with someone in a book or a podcast or whatever, it's the same with YouTube, right? That's why people follow YouTube creators versus Instagram and all
Yeah.
that stuff, because you can spend more time with someone. And that's why I've started my YouTube, because you get to tell more of a story and connect with an audience more in a 20-minute video versus a 30-second clip on Instagram. And it's such an interesting concept to think, listening to a podcast, you're 60 minutes with someone, reading a book, you're 60 hours with someone, depending on the book. And I guess it's the same with staying at one of your cabins, right? Like you're forced to be with yourself more. You're forced to spend actual time in your own thoughts. Yeah, and you think about, fuck, am I a good person? Do I like the person I am? Do I like the path? Do I like the path I'm on? Like, you're looking in the mirror, you have those self reflections, and I'm a big believer that a lot of people are uncomfortable spending time with themselves, because I know a lot of people that have jumped from relationship to relationship to relationship their whole lives, and I'm not knocking that. Who am I to judge, right? I'm just my own person, but I think it's so important to be comfortable by yourself, to be comfortable alone, to be comfortable in your own skin, because I'm a believer that when you are that, then it kind of unlocks a load more possibilities for you with relationships with other people and opportunities with other things in life. And I think what you guys are doing is probably helping people come to those realizations and try and spend some time alone or with their loved one. And so, question on that: do the people that book your cabins, is it mostly couples, or do people book in themselves as well?
Yeah, it's about 75% couples. So, which is surprised actually, because I think we saw it as like something you come in by yourself and you journal and read and whatever. But actually, it's a very profound thing as a couple, because I mean, most couples that have been together for less than a decade, it probably haven't spent a day together without their phones. And again, it does make a huge difference. And like being just with yourself is an intense experience to connect with yourself. Like being just there with your partner and not having the phone to kind of, you know, ease the tension sometimes is quite profound. So we sometimes get these kind of blow ups on the
I was going to
first full
say, have you
day
had any
where
breakups in
I'm sure we have. Yeah. I mean, I've had blow ups in cabins with ex girlfriends where, like, there's something very intense, about being there on that first day, and you kind of take it away, and again you're feeling this anxiousness. But actually, it's very liberating. You feel great afterwards, and it's sometimes you just needed to kind of clear those things out. But I think what you said around the learning to be with yourself is incredibly powerful and true, which is like we so much of the time we have these we feel like we can't spend the time with ourselves. So we, lean on a partner or whatever it is to kind of get the salvation. But the issue with that is, that's always going to blow up eventually. And like, it all comes back down to, whatever it is that you can't spend time with yourself, like you have to address that first, because that is the root cause. And that is just going to trickle into every relationship, whatever it is. And so I think, there's a huge amount of benefit in learning to do that, even if, for some people, it's absolutely terrifying to spend a day with themselves.
I think for a lot of people, it's terrifying. Like, and I think that's where therapy, to go back to where we started on, like that's where that can really help. If sometimes you
For
need
sure.
someone else, a professional, a random person to bring it out of you. And it's funny because, I mean, without getting too sentimental, it's so funny the type of shit we tell a random person about our lives versus leaning on a family member or a best friend who
It's
actually knows
crazy.
everything about us. And you kind of, I mean, I found myself, my therapist is in Australia, and so we do our Zoom calls. And I found myself fucking bawling my eyes out over a Zoom call at 8 a.m. in the morning before I go to work. And I'm like, what the fuck? Like, what the hell just happened
It's
there?
crazy, man.
But I need it.
Yeah.
You need it. And oh man, I think it's so important, and so, as you say, it's so healthy. And don't get me wrong, I think life's better with people. I think life's better with
Yeah.
shared experiences. But I think those experiences are infinitely better when you are comfortable in your own skin, and your partner or whoever you're with is also comfortable in their own skin. And once you reach that level, and then you find that person or find those people that you want to hang around, you say the five people you hang around the most. Once you reach that group, and you're comfortable by yourself, then everything just becomes better, and everything is more natural. You're not scared. That anxiety kind of leaves, probably to some extent. Um, because, as you said, alcohol at the start when you're younger, I used to drink quite a bit when I was younger, as did all my friends, as did everyone I know, because that kind of becomes a social lubricant in those situations where you are still getting to know yourself, you're growing into your own skin, and other people are doing the same. Um, so to wrap it up, I think I fucking love what you do. I cannot wait to come back to the UK, which is not a phrase I say often, um, apart from to see my family. I know my mum will obviously be listening to this, but I do love you, mum. I'm always excited to come back. But I think next time I'll have to book in a stay for sure. Hector, one thing we do on the podcast, and how we finish, is a couple questions. First of all, I just want to ask you, as a person, how would you like to be remembered?
That's a great question. I think one side of me is like I think the further I go, the more I'm like I don't need to be remembered. Like I know I'm
Wow.
trying to do this whole startup, which I'm sure there's a big part of that, trying to show the world how special I am. But like it's all going to be over in a flash, and whatever I do in this life, one day I will be forgotten. And if that is in 1 year or 1,000, it doesn't matter too much. But I think that's a little bit of a glib answer. And if it was, how would I like the kind of people around me to remember me when I'm gone? I think it's like he was a kind person. He was compassionate. He was there for the people in his life. I think that's what matters at the end of the day. I think, when all is said and done, it's the quality of your relationships. What you were saying earlier around, there are certain friends that if you see them, like that's having drinks with your best friends is what it's all about. And I think there's this real quality over quantity of relationships. So I think it's, I was there, I was kind to, the people closest to me in this life.
I love that. And as you know, the podcast is called Abnormal. It's the podcast for normal people who want to do abnormal things, which you are definitely one of the ones doing something abnormal. So the question we always ask our guests, or I always ask my guests, is what is your one piece of advice for someone out there who's wanting to do something abnormal in their lives?
I would say just fucking get started, because the first step is the hardest. Like once you quit the job, start the thing, fucking, because once you're going, then you're off the races. Like once you're in motion, it's easier to stay in motion. So just fucking do it.
And you're a living example of that as you quit your job the weekend after or the week after coming back from the Himalayas, right?
Yeah, I spent 3 hours googling cabins on a Friday night, and I was like, this will probably work, and quit on Monday.
Fucking hell, that is optimism to the extreme. I love it. It took me a good couple of weeks to quit my job, but we both got there in the end.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, Hector, thank you so much for your time, man. I mean, I know how busy you are. I've really, really appreciate you coming on, and I cannot wait to spread the story some more. And I'm sure, I mean, there's so many things that you've said in that episode that I think will resonate with a lot of people, not just on a business standpoint, not an entrepreneur standpoint. There are obviously many lessons from that stuff as well, but from the wellness, the lifestyle, the past, the present, the future, everything you've kind of covered there is really quite profound and really good to be in the presence of. And so thank you for the conversation, mate. Appreciate it.
Not at all, man. Huge. I think you're putting out such an important message to the world, and so yeah, very excited, honored to be on here, and very excited to follow your podcast and journey as well.
Appreciate you, man. Thank you very much.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Abnormal. If you enjoyed, please consider subscribing to the channel and give us a 5-star review in whatever podcast platform you are listening or watching on right now, as it goes a long way to help growing the show. Thank you, and see you in the next one.